Welcome to Why Does It Matter? How to Navigate the PSO 2-Point App for the Follow Up Interview. I'm Charlotte Alverson with the University of Oregon, and we support the Oregon Department of Education Post-School Outcome Project. So, why does this data collection matter? The post-school outcome data collection is a mandated data collection effort. It's required of every state every year. The state is responsible for determining the method used to collect the post-school outcome data, and therefore a consistent process is used to help ensure that accurate data are collected and reported. These step-by-step directions are intended to help those people who are conducting the follow-up interviews for the first time. It's designed to help them become familiar with the app that's used for this data collection. Therefore, if you are a person who has collected data many times for this post-school outcome data collection, this training is not for you. If you're brand new to the data collection effort, or maybe you've done it once or twice, this is the data training for you. The PSO app that we use for this data collection is secure, and it's designed to facilitate data collection. And what I mean by that is built within the system are skip logics that help ensure that the right set of questions are being asked. And sometimes those questions are based on a previous response. So depending on whether you click yes or no, you're going to see in some areas different questions. It's designed to facilitate the interviewers data collection so that they're not having to learn the interview and every component of it and to navigate through the way you would on a paper and pencil. So the system is set up to make it easier for you. It's also completely safe for collecting data. And by that, I mean you can't break it. Any oops or any wrong button that gets clicked and you want to change it, it can always be undone. In most cases, you're going to be able to undo it simply by clicking the button again. In a few cases, you may need some support from us to help you undo a clicked button. And we're glad to do that. That's not a problem at all. There's also a training platform that we can work with you to get access to if you're wanting to see what the data collection app looks like before actually working within the live app. So reach out to us. We can provide some individual trainings using the training platform. All right, as an overview to this training and what to expect, I'll walk you through just some orientation to the app, how to navigate through it. I'll show you where to find a glossary of terms and defining the icons that are used within the app. Then we'll walk through a step-by-step process. The assumption that I am working from is that data are being entered into the app live during an interview. In this training, we're not going to address how to conduct the exit interviews or how to review the student list or suggestions for interview strategies. This is strictly focused on the step-by-step process for entering data. All right, access and navigation. You'll access the app through ODE's central login, and you see the link here on the screen. Once you're in that central login, on the left-hand side, you'll see a dashboard, or excuse me, a navigation plan pane, sorry, a navigation pane on the left side that will take you directly to the home landing page, the dashboard, the follow-up or the exit interviews, or help. Within the app, you're going to be clicking on buttons and or scrolling in order to navigate through it. And if you need help accessing the app, you're going to go to our website to find the one-page document that's titled Accessing ODE Post-School Outcomes 2.0 app. All right, once you're in the app itself, you may need to maximize the viewing width of the window, and you can do that by clicking this menu button on the left-hand side of the screen, or using the expand screen button, which is the double arrows on the diagonal over here on the right-hand side of the screen. Within the app, there are a number of dashboards that are designed to highlight key information. We try to keep these current, especially during the data collection season, so that you have immediate information at your fingertips. So, important things like the access to the website or the email address for the ODE data team in case you run into questions. Within the app, you'll see both buttons and pop-ups. Buttons are used to navigate through the app. Here's an example of what one of the buttons looks like. And then the pop-ups uh, will be visible where there's additional information that's hidden from screen. And if you mouse over, you'll see that the mouse pointer becomes a finger icon for those active buttons. To find a glossary of all the PSO buttons and their descriptions, again, go to the website and look for the glossary of PSO app buttons. So within the app, you'll see a help button that looks like this, a rectangle with a question mark inside it. And you'll see that when you mouse over it, here's one of the pop-ups that we were talking about that provides additional information about whatever it is. In this case, it happens to be defining the total levers. Within the navigation pane, when you click help, you'll find the frequently asked question document, and you'll also see a list of the resources that are available to support the data collection. With regard to progress within the app, as data are collected in this follow-up data collection dashboard, you will see that it updates dynamically. So each time an interview is started or completed or in progress, you'll see these numbers here change under follow-up status. You'll also see the preliminary response rate and the preliminary engagement outcomes. And again, these are dynamic. As each interview is done, you'll see this change live. So let's talk about access to the PSO app. You'll start with getting permission from your special education director to obtain the password in order to access the central login. And if your special ed director can't give you that information, you may need to locate your district security administrator to be able to get into the app. Once you get into it, you're going to select the button that says Special Ed Post-School Outcome 2.0 Oregon Department of Education within the apps, and that's what it looks like here. Once you click into it, you're going to land on the home dashboard. Remember that from the navigation panel shown previously. Again, those highlighted key informations are what's showing up here. And then you're going to scroll past the dashboard to this section for agency contacts responsible for the PSO and agency contacts for staff performing the interviews. This information needs to be updated before you can continue with the first interview. So to update those contacts, you're going to click on the little pencil button to edit the title, the name, the email, phone number, etc. for your local administrator, your follow-up data contact, so the person that's doing the follow-up contacts, or the person who's doing the exit contacts. Maybe you have different people doing those different components. The reason we ask for this information is simply, well, twofold. One, in case something catastrophic happens on our end, like a bug gets in the system or there's a glitch, something's down, not working the way it should, we want to be able to reach out to the appropriate person and say, this is what's happened and how we're resolving that. Under the agency contacts for staff performing the interviews, you're going to, again, click the little pencil icon to edit that information, Or if it's a person who's no longer involved with your data collection effort, you'll click the delete button with the red X. If you need to add new staff, click the add contact information for new data collectors. And within this list of people doing the interviews, you can list as many data collectors as you need. There's no limit to the number of people who can be listed here. Once you have the edits made and new contacts added as appropriate, you can click the button titled Click to Verify. You can also do this if all the information is still correct or when revisions are made, and you'll see that the verified by and on date then will show on this page. After updating and verifying your agency contacts and the interviewers, you're going to click the follow up button to enter your district dashboard. So that greenish, tealish button here in the center for follow up is what you're going to click. That button, that follow up button, is going to take you into the follow up dashboard. Here again, you want to make sure that the right school year is showing. In this example, it's the 24-25 school year. In future years, you'll want to make sure it's 25, 26, 26, 27, etc. To do the data collection, you're going to scroll down until you reach the follow-up entry area. And at that point, you're going to click on the data entry button to see your list of schools. So you'll find that button under this category here, follow-up data entry. In this example, we're assuming you've already looked at your student review list. If you needed to, you could go in and click the student list review button. But for our purposes, we're talking about data entry on the follow-up. And so you will click this button here on the right-hand side. All right, step 4, once you're in the follow-up, you'll again land on the follow-up data collection dashboard. Just as I described previously, it's going to show you the follow-up status, the preliminary response rate, and the engagement rates. And again, remember this is dynamic, so it changes throughout the data collection window as an interview is started or finished. Once you're in the follow-up collection dashboard, you're going to scroll past the status dashboard to see the list of schools, or if you're a district with only one school, of course, it'll just show the one school name there. Want to note here in this example, some schools may have an asterisk by their name. That asterisk indicates a special program being attended by one or more of the students from the district. And the asterisk will also be listed on the student's name. So for this one you see here, Spirit High School has an asterisk by it, meaning that at least one student is attending a special program. So let's talk about what we mean by special programs. The special program is the attending school. In most cases, it's going to be an out-of-district school, whereas the student's home district is their resident district. It's the resident district that is responsible for the PSO follow-up interview. However, what we recommend and best practice is to coordinate with the attending district, asking them to do the follow-up interview with the former student or their family. And the reason for that is the attending district likely has the relationship with the family or the student to be able to conduct the interview. We ask that you be patient with us if you know that you have a student who is attending a special program and that program isn't listed. Um, Please reach out to us. There isn't a comprehensive list of every special program across the state, and so we're building that list as we go along. So let us know if there is a special program that is missing from the list. We'll gladly work with you to get it updated. All right, so you're in the system and you are in this case, the example here is Mudd High School. Below that, you'll start to see each student listed. Once you click on the the name of the school. And again, you want to make sure that this drop down window shows the correct school year. Sometimes, as you go in and out of the system or move between different components of the system, the school year may divert back to the previous year. So just always double check that you're in the right school year. You're going to confirm the student's information, their SSID number, name, how they exited school, their exit survey, whether or not it was conducted. That's going to be a yes or a no. Their primary disability, ethnicity, age at time of exit, and their status of their interview. If you find that you need to edit some of that student information, you can do so by clicking on the lightning bolt button to the left of the student's name. And this is where you'll be able to edit the last school that the student attended or to mark the student as ineligible, as shown here on the left-hand side. The other information that's shown here is editable only by ODE's data team. And so if you notice that the name is wrong or the eligibility, primary disability is wrong, um, exit interview, so forth, you'll need to contact the ODE data team to make those edits. If you mark a student as ineligible, you'll be required to confirm the reason the student is ineligible. And there are only four reasons for a student being ineligible. Either they've exited school and returned to school, or they're still in school, they never left, or they've been out of school for less than a year, or the student's deceased. Those are the only four reasons for which a student is ineligible. Any other reason or any other student should be included in the PSO data collection, regardless of disability, um, any other reason like method of exit, so forth. So you're ready to collect the data from the student. You're going to click on their name. And again, you'll see here some of their demographic data, method of exit, so forth, and the status of their interview over here on the right. When you click on that student's name, their contact information is going to be filled in here if contact information was included in the exit interview. That information automatically forwards into the follow-up interview. So in this example, you see Daisy Duck as the student and Daisy's cell phone number here. Two contacts for her parents, Huey and Scrooge. Um, they have email addresses and phone numbers as well. The exit interview is designed to collect multiple points of contact information. So whatever information goes into that exit, again, will feed into your follow-up interview. In the event that there's no contact information listed or the exit interview wasn't completed, you're going to need to use the district's other resources to contact or find that student. And so you'll see when that's the case, you'll see a message down below that says no contacts exist from the exit interview. All right, for the follow-up interview, there are 6 areas within the follow-up interview. The pre-interview and consent areas we're going to talk about a little bit. We're not going to talk about the post-secondary education. It's pretty straightforward. Um, Within the employment area, we're going to talk about a couple of different questions that we have seen people struggle with. We'll talk about the additional data that's available and then the post-interview. All right, so with regard to the pre-interview, Um, this is where the interviewer confirms that the student is eligible for the interview by answering either yes or no. Is this student eligible for the follow-up interview? Remember, if they're not eligible, meaning they're ineligible, you're going to be asked to state the reason for why the student is ineligible. Under the consent component, you're going to determine whether or not the former student or their designee is willing to answer the interview questions. In order to answer this question about consent, You must talk to a person. This is not a consent that can be answered on behalf of the student or the family. So the question being asked here is, are you, referring to the student or family, willing to answer a few questions about your education or your child's education, jobs, life in general following high school? There, the consent is to answer these questions. So their answer is either a yes or a no. Again, only the former student or the family can answer this question. It isn't a question that the interviewer can answer on behalf of the student. A refusal is a legitimate response to this question, and not having contact information or not getting an answer after leaving a message is not a refusal because you didn't talk to a person. So again, the only way this question can be answered is by talking to a person. And that person saying, "Yes, I'm willing to answer a few questions," or "No, I'm not willing to answer a few questions." What we've often seen last year, what we saw multiple times, was that the interviewer would say, "I talked to mom or dad, and they would not give me information about Charlotte's contact. They wouldn't tell me how to contact Charlotte." When we looked at the refusal was marked no. So the question that the family was refusing was to give contact information. That's not the same question that's being asked here. The question that's being asked here is, are you willing to answer questions? So in order to click yes or no with regard to consent, that family member has to be asked, are you willing to answer questions? If the answer is no, then you click no, and you can ask, would you give would you give me Charlotte's contact information? No, I'm not willing to give you Charlotte's contact information. And then you can make that note in the interviewer notes at the end of the interview. But make sure that the question that they're answering here is, with regard to consent, are you willing to answer a few questions about your education, jobs, and life in general after high school? All right. So, in order to help clarify that consent question, what's new for 2025, that consent question, are you willing? The response options are now yes, no, or did not talk to anyone. All right. So, the next section within the interview is on post secondary education. There are 3 questions to determine whether the student enrolled in further education since leaving high school. The next section after post-secondary education is employment, and there are a maximum of 8 questions to determine whether the former student worked since leaving high school. Then we get into a set of 11 additional supplemental questions about the student's former experience, or the former student's experiences in and after high school. Lastly is the post-interview. It is required regardless of whether or not an interview was conducted with a student or their family, and it's questions about who and how the data were collected. All right. Just as a reminder, each attempt is logged into the system each time a student's name is clicked, so you don't have to collect that information outside of the system. Each attempt results in one of 3 outcomes for that interview. Either it's not completed, will not be completed, no further actions to be taken, or the result of that attempt is a completed, or excuse me, will complete later. So maybe the interview was started but not finished, or the survey was complete and we're ready to submit it. If you did not talk to a person, so you did not make contact with them, you're going to click either will not complete an interview, or there was no contact and you're going to try again to complete the interview. If you talk to a person, then your options, because you've had contact with them, is that, for example, the survey was interrupted, so you're going to complete it later. Maybe there was a baby crying and it needed to be attended to, or the person got interrupted for some other reason, the call dropped. If you're using cell phones, you're going to come back and complete it later. Um, or you made contact and they either completed the interview with you or they refused, in which case you're going to submit the survey. If you click will not complete, then you're going to need to explain why you're not going to complete the interview. And that may be that there was a wrong contact information, no contact information, you can't find any additional information, so you're not able to complete the interview, or you left a message, or you got no answer. And it'll give you this prompt here. Please indicate the reason that you will not ever be completing an interview for, and it'll say the specific student. If you select will complete later, meaning the interview is still in process, it's still an option to complete the interview, um, you're going to be asked the reason for completing it later. Whoops. If the reason for completing it later, oh, sorry, let me back that up. Go back here. Okay, so you will complete later. Then you're going to be asked again to explain the reason or give a reason for why you're having to complete it later. Maybe they're at work, they're not able to take the call right now, they want to schedule it another time. Maybe you talked to a parent, you had the student's wrong information, but the parent gave you the new contact information. So you're going to come back in and try later. You left a message, no answer, wasn't able to explain the purpose. So you got a hang up on a call. Maybe there was some other reason for needing to come back and complete it later. Maybe the power went out. Whatever the reason is, you're just going to make notes of it here and then click continue to go on. If you submit the interview, you're going to get one of two options here. It's completed and it'll show up then as a completed interview, or maybe there was a question that got skipped or the button didn't get completely pushed. And so it's going to tell you that not all the questions are answered and you must go back and answer the required questions. And so this is where if one of the required questions is consent, if you marked did not talk to anyone in the consent, you're either going to be able to select will not complete or will complete later. And the choice that you make here depends on the contacts that are made and the situation for the response. So if you get this message here that not all questions were answered, and it shows that the consent question is the reason that not all questions are asked, again, you can go back and say, I'm not going to complete it, or I'll complete it later, um, based on whether you've talked to a person or you've not talked to a person. All right, so an attempt at an interview. So you've got a person on the phone or you've attempted to do an interview. You've either talked to the person or you did not talk to a person. So let's go down the branch of I talked to a person. If you were able to explain the purpose of the call, again, use the telephone script here for that. The person agreed to be interviewed, so they've consented. You're going to select yes on the consent, continue with the interview, complete your post interview questions, and then select submit. Let's say you talk to a person, you explain the purpose of the call, and they did not agree. They refuse. No, thank you. I'm not willing to answer questions. You're going to end the interview. You're going to select no on the consent, complete the post-school interview, and then complete the post-interview questions, and then hit select. So these are the options for having talked to a person, right? Ideally, we get an agree and we get to submit the interview. If we go through the process and they say, no, I'm not willing to answer your questions about my child, then you're going to select no on the consent and select submit. Let's say you weren't able to talk to a person. You have to decide then, are you going to try again or will you not try again? If you're going to try again, enter a note or a comment in the post-interview questions. Maybe it's, again, students working, not able to answer the phone right now, the person's phone died, whatever the reason is, and then select will complete later. Here's where you want to try multiple days and multiple times using multiple contact methods. And we typically ask for 3 to 5 or recommend 3 to 5 attempts on different days at different times, maybe even by different people in order to complete an interview. If for some reason you're not going to try again, maybe you've tried 3, 5, 6, 8, 12 times, it's okay to say, I'm not going to try again. Complete the post interview questions, explain what you've done, select will not complete and the reason for not completing it, and explain anything that's unusual in the interviewer notes. Those interviewer notes really help us to understand why all of a sudden an interview ended in the middle of the interview. We see results, answers, and then all of a sudden there's a missing. Uh, it ends. So explain to us what's happening. It's not an explanation of why something didn't happen. It's an explanation of what was happening within that interview. So help us out with those questions. Sometimes we've been able to look at the responses within the interviewer notes, and after contacting the interview realize that actually it does count as a completed interview. You have all the key information here, but the key information is recorded in an interviewer note as opposed to one of the questions. And so that, again, is one of the reasons for having the interviewer's contact information. If you're not going to try again, you do not select the submit button in those 3 options. You leave that blank. All right, follow-up survey. So there is a telephone script. It's available on the website, and we recommend you use that. It'll make sure that all the key important information is shared with the respondent before they consent. And then again, this is the consent question. A person has to answer this and not leaving a message or having the interviewer complete the consent on behalf of a person. This has to be done by the former student or their family. If you answer no here, it's going to drop you down to the post-interview questions. You're not going to be able to access any of the other sections of the interview by answering no here. All right. And again, the post-interview questions are required, and the system is set up using that skip logic to make sure the correct questions are answered. All right. So thinking about the interview, you want the interview to be conversational. This is where if you're using the exit interview and the student has said, I want to be a lab technician, work that into the conversation. So I remember you saying last year in your exit interview, you wanted to be a lab technician. Have you gone to school to be a lab technician? The intent with the interview is for it to be relaxed and conversational. We encourage you to read the question as it's written, but we also recognize that sometimes it's necessary to rephrase or explain to a former student or their family what the question is asked. You want to explain only to help someone who doesn't understand the question as it's written. Sometimes it's necessary to do a little probe, meaning you ask additional questions or you reframe how they've answered in order to make sure that you're able to record the correct information. What we don't want you to do is to read the list of response options to the respondent. Some of the response categories are long. The language is designed for the interviewer. It's not designed for the respondent, and respondents can become confused when they don't know what the answer is or they don't understand, and they'll end the interview or they'll just take a wild guess. And so Don't read the response options to the student. We want you to be familiar enough with the interview protocol that in the conversation, you as the interviewer will know what response to select. So here's an example of what we mean by that. Um, this is the one of the employment questions. Again, we want you to ask the question conversationally, listen for the answer, and avoid reading that list of response options. So the question here is, where is your job or where was the job? Wait for the answer. Click the box and read the option you selected if it helps to be sure that you marked the best choice. If for some reason the former student has had multiple jobs, you are answering for the job that they held for 3 months or more, or they're working at minimum wage for. So look at this response option here. What was your job? Was your employer in your community with people with and without disabilities? Were you in the military? Were you working in a small group in a community with 2 to 8 individuals and paid minimum wage? I mean, this would be hard for anyone to listen to, understand what the options are, and answer the question if the response categories are being read off. So again, don't read off these response categories. Use your probe questioning technique to say, so where was your last job? I was working at McDonald's. All right. If the answer is I was working at McDonald's, then you know that it's in their community with people with and without disabilities. So you can click that and move on to the next question. If the response is, well, I'm working for my uncle at his lawn mowing company. Well, tell me more about that. How many people are working with that company? And you're asking that to get to whether or not it's a uh, community job with other people without disabilities. So if the person says, "Oh, it's just me. My uncle set up this job just for me," then that's not going to be in their community with people without disabilities. That is going to be potentially um, a supported employment, or it's going to be maybe some could be self-employed. Likely in this example, it's a small business, family business. It may be in a sheltered employment uh, situation where, again, you're going to need to probe with some questions to understand what is the correct answer here. You notice down here, employed while in jail or in prison. That is a legitimate response for the follow-up interview. So a person may be incarcerated and working while they're in jail or in prison. So don't discount their being in prison as a reason to not be able to answer some of the questions. All right, another question that we often see that's difficult for some folks with regard to employment is the minimum wage question. And this question is a required question in order to determine whether or not the individual is competitively employed. So the question asks, what city or town do you work in? And the reason we do that is in order to give you the minimum wage categories for the different parts of Oregon. So if the person says, "Oh, I work in Bandon," you'll be able to use this drop down window, find Bandon, and it'll show you the minimum wage for Bandon. Um, at that point, you would say, "So you're working in Bandon. Are you making at least, in this example, 1405 per hour?" So using Adele as the example here. Oh, so you're working in Adele. Are you making at least 1405 per hour at your job in Adele? After they answer yes or no, that's where you're clicking here. Are you making minimum wage? Yes or no, or not sure. If they're working in a city or town that's outside of Oregon or it's not listed, maybe it's a town that's not on our list, let us know if that's the case. But um, you're going to ask this question, what town or city did you work in? And scroll to other. and then you'll be able to enter the other uh, city or town, or if it's a state, Anchorage, Alaska, please put the city and the state there. Enter where they're working, and then again, you can ask, "Are you making minimum wage in Anchorage, Alaska?" If they don't know, you go ahead and click "Not sure" here, and we'll follow up, in terms of looking at what the minimum wage is in Alaska or, other cities and try to determine whether or not minimum wage is being made. Where this comes in handy is with the military. So we'll see questions that have been answered. My child's working in the military. When it comes to this minimum wage, it's somewhere in Alabama. And the person says, "Are you making minimum wage or not?" The respondent says, "I don't know." Well, if they're in the military, we know that they're paid the federal minimum wage. So even though the respondent says not sure, we'll go back in again, piecing together the information based on the other questions that are asked, or sometimes interviewer notes. We often see student is in the military, enrolled in military right after school, completed 90 days basic training, whatever the response options are, and then we can change this here to coincide with what the response options should be. All right, so as you do your interviews, the status is visible for each student interview. You'll see that on the right-hand side of the screen. The status options are complete, no further action, not started, not eligible, and in progress. The status is changed when you answer the first question under the post-secondary education. It'll immediately flip over to in progress. Complete means that the interview is done, all the questions have been answered, or a refusal was given. That counts as a completed interview as well. No further action means that the contact will be made. No contact will be made for a specific reason. And remember, you have to report what that reason is. Not started means that question one has not been answered, and it'll remain as a not started status. Not eligible, so the student was marked ineligible previously in the system. Again, you'll have to report the reason for that. And then in progress, at least one question has been answered, and it will remain in progress until either the submit has been clicked or the will not complete button is clicked. All right, a completed interview means that all the questions were answered or they refused to participate. And again, you see those response options here. When you click the submit button, you'll see two messages. This is a review from previous slide. Either it was submitted or not all the questions were answered. And it'll prompt you to go back to which of the required questions were not answered. Those supplemental questions are optional and they will not show up here as a required uh, question to answer. If the consent button is the one that's highlighted and you did not talk to a person, remember you're going to select did not talk to anyone and then click will complete later if you're going to make more attempts, or click the will not complete and give the reason for why. An incomplete interview means that you didn't reach the person and you'll try again. Um, an incomplete can also mean that some questions were not answered. For example, the interview was interrupted. Again, you're going to complete it later. Select that button. All right, we get to the post-interview section. It's required for all interviews, whether the former student refused or will not complete was marked. We're going to ask and require questions about who entered the data, how the data were collected, the number of attempts, and so forth. Again, use the interviewer notes to describe anything unusual or critical information or challenges with an interview. This is an example. she's receiving good training in the Marines for a great job in electronics when she leaves the military. All right. Submit the data collection. So when all your interviews have been done on the final day of collection, whichever comes first, you're going to mark collection complete. And that button is located on your follow-up collection dashboard. When you click that, you're going to be prompted to confirm that collection is complete. Again, you'll get a pop-up button here that says continue. Are you sure you want to do this? If for some reason you click the button and then you realize, oh, I need to edit the button. Maybe you ran into a former student in the parking lot and they've agreed to do the interview. You need to unclick or unlock the collection. You can do that up until the last day that the data collection window is open. So for this year, it's September 29th, and um, you have complete control over that up until the 29th. Once the window has closed, so after for this year 2025, after September the 29th, it cannot be reopened. I can't reopen it. ODE can't reopen it. So the data collection window, June 5th through September 29th, within that window of time, you can unlock the collection and reopen it for edits as needed. All right, so again, the system automatically records date and time for each student record as it's opened for an interview. You'll see that down here at the bottom. It'll show the collection time and then what the outcome of that attempt was. If you've again completed an interview, realized, oops, I made a mistake, I need to go back in and correct that, you can open the data entry for that individual student up until the window time data collection window closes. We're happy to help you navigate this. Don't feel like you're on your own with it. We just want you to know that that is an option. So be in touch with your questions. You can email us. You can email is the best way. We don't have the phone numbers here. So reach out to us with your questions. And again, thank you so much for your participation in this data collection.